What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. We got the Wildcard weekend ahead of us here. It's Friday night as I record this. I'm going to basically just open up each game. We'll talk about it. We'll go over the practice reports, let you guys know who's in, who's out, and then we'll look at some things on DraftKings and kind of tell you guys what we're liking for each game. I'm going to hop into a screen share here, and we're going to just hop right into this one. The Chargers at the Houston Texans. Chargers, 3-point road dogs. I like it. 41.5 implied. This one's one of the lower scoring games of the weekend. If I just look at my game lines over here and we kind of filter this, this one not expected to be a ton of points. It actually went down when I logged these the other day. So it's the lowest scoring game of the weekend by at least a field goal. Chargers Texans. So hopefully nothing too crazy in this one. If we look at the injury reports real quick for Houston, and we have everything in for these guys. Shaq Mason, guard out. A couple guys questionable: Danico Autry, Christian Harris, John Mechie. But otherwise, this looks fairly decent for the Houston Texans. If I go to the Chargers real quick here, what are we dealing with? Josh Palmer listed as out, so that's a bit of a knock there for the receivers. They're going to rely heavily on Quentin Johnston, who didn't practice on Wednesday. He had a thigh thing going on, but limited Tuesday and Thursday. So he's in good shape. You're going to see Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and then I don't know who's going to rotate as that number 3 wide receiver. We might see them go a little bit more tight end heavy. They like mixing in Darius Davis and maybe DJ Chark gets some play. So we'll watch for that wide receiver 3 spot there for the Chargers. Otherwise, J.K. Dobbins has been limited. He's good to go. Gus Edwards, full practice. A lot of guys questionable, but overall the Chargers look like they're in good shape heading into this one. So how do we think this one's going to go? I want to just look at the fantasy points allowed tool here and see what we're working with here. Did I update that correctly here? I don't know if I updated that correctly. I thought I did. Maybe it's just being weird. Let me hit refresh on this real quick. I should have had it where all this was removed. Let me check that out real quick. We'll go to my start sit charts here. I thought I had it all good to go with all the week 18 shenanigans here, but I guess not. All right. Well, anyways, we're going to go over to FF today here, and we'll just use their way to look at things. All right, so CJ Stroud has not been playing well. The Los Angeles Chargers, they ranked 20th here in points allowed to the quarterback position. The Texans ranked 15th. I feel better about Justin Herbert hitting his 16 points per game than I do about CJ Stroud hitting his points per game. If we just look at some of the numbers in here, passing props wise, they're giving, let me see here. Let's go to, they got Stroud at 219, Herbert at 227. I feel more comfortable about Herbert hitting that. But again, they're without Josh Palmer. So not a lot of passing yards probably in this game. And they're both saying these guys are not very likely to throw 2 touchdowns. They're giving Herbert a slight edge here with his average of 1.4 to hit that. I'm not feeling too great about that. They have him listed here at both 1.5. They're taking Herbert, not CJ Stroud. So expect maybe 2 passing touchdowns in this game, maybe 3 at the most. And if we go to touchdown scorers, who's scoring these touchdowns? They're giving Joe Mixon one at minus 125. The Chargers, let's look at how they are against the opponent's running backs real quick. I'm going to filter to PPR here. The LA Chargers, they're one of the better teams here. They rank 27th, less than 20 fantasy points per game to the running back position in full PPR. So I'm not expecting a huge Joe Mixon opportunity. They've only allowed a handful of touchdowns. They have, they limited the Raiders to no rushing touchdowns. Antonio Gibson and Ramondre Stevenson, no rushing touchdowns. Audric Estime did get one, and then Michael Burton did catch one back in that Week 16 game against the Broncos. And it looks like Bucky Irving had a good game, but Rachaad White gets a touchdown. So tough spot for Joe Mixon. I don't know if I would click on the minus 125. I do think that we're looking at J.K. Dobbins and Ladd McConkey. Those are the top 2 guys that I would look at for scoring for the Chargers here. I do want to look and see the Texans against opponent running backs. Are they? Yeah, they're pretty good too. They rank 30th, so you can't really run on both teams here. So we're kind of, again, I guess it's going to come down to if both teams can't really, establish the run and kind of struggle there, it's going to come down to the quarterback play. And right now, Justin Herbert has been playing way better than CJ Stroud. So I'm probably more interested in Herbert's passing props. If we just look at some of the receiving numbers real quick here, I don't like this new update that they did here. It's kind of janky. But anyways, you got Ladd McConkey over 5.5 receptions. People are hitting the hell out of that. And if you come down to his yards, 75.5, if he catches 6 passes, he's been good with yards after the catch. I think Ladd McConkey over 75.5 is something worth looking at. And then Quentin Johnston here, people are smashing his over 3.5 props. Again, Josh Palmer is listed as out. And QJ, I mean, if he catches 4 passes, 45 yards seems very doable. So I think the passing game will filter through both Ladd and Quentin Johnston pretty heavily here. I do like Will Dissly here as a sleeper. He could be involved in this one. And then, I do like Nico Collins. But again, it's not a great matchup for both of these passing games. If you look at the wide receiver points allowed per game here, let's take a peek at what we're looking at. Did I miss them? Where are the Chargers? So the Texans rank 11th, which you can throw on the Texans. They allowed 21 receiving touchdowns to the wide receiver position. And am I just missing the Chargers here? Am I crazy? Chargers 18th here, so a little bit stingier than the Texans. Allowed 19 touchdowns on the year. I think everything's kind of just pointing to the Chargers in this one. Even though they're down Josh Palmer, I'm leaning Chargers in this one. I think -3 feels nice, and we like some of the passing numbers. I'll give Justin Herbert 2 passing touchdowns, and again, there's probably not going to be a lot of points had in this game. This game's projected right now about 41.5. It's going to be about 23 to 20, 21 to 18, somewhere in that range for this first Saturday game. But we'll move on. This is probably the worst game of the weekend. We're not super excited about this one. I am excited about the Steelers and the Ravens. If I just pull up these practice reports real quick, we did get Zay Flowers ruled out already. They're hoping he can maybe be back in a week or two, but that's a tough loss for their passing game. Kyle Hamilton, Deontay Hardy, he's on IR. Don't really need to see him. And then it's good to see Justice Hill back. So the Ravens, even though they're down Zay Flowers, they are pretty healthy overall. And then if we go over to Pittsburgh real quick, Boswell didn't practice. I'm not sure what's up with that, but otherwise they have a couple guys returning maybe from IR. Pretty healthy looking Pittsburgh Steelers squad here. So really just the Zay Flowers news is the big one. And if we're looking at this game, Ravens are 8.5-point home favorites, which feels a bit much. I kind of think the Steelers can cover that 8.5, especially without Zay Flowers. They ruled Zay Flowers out, and this game really did not move much. It was 9.5, and it only dropped a point. I think this does hurt the ability to move the ball through the air for the Ravens. So I'm kind of thinking Steelers plus 8.5 makes sense. We do have 2 games that these teams played earlier in the year. If we just look at these real quick. Let's go to their schedule. All right. So back in week 11, the Steelers won at home 18-16. And then week 16, it wasn't the best game, 34-17. That one was in Baltimore. The Steelers, I don't think did they have George Pickens back in that game? I don't believe Pickens was there. Russell Wilson looked okay. They didn't really run the ball a ton in that game here. And no George Pickens in that game. But Zay Flowers was a huge part of that game, 5 for 100. He had a lot of yards in that game. He counted for basically a third of their team's yards. Big loss for the Ravens. I kind of like the 8.5 here. If we're looking at touchdown scores, you got to give the big dog a touchdown. And you can see Rashad Bateman up here at plus 155 to score with Mark Andrews at plus 150. I think it's kind of fun to do these bets where you take, especially when both guys are plus, and say your unit's like $20, you just kind of put a 20 on both guys separately. And there's a chance that if Bateman scores, you're going to turn $20 into $51. And if Mark Andrews scores, it's 20 to 50. So you only need one of these guys to score, and you're still up $10. But if both score, and that's that could happen, you turn $40 basically into $100, which is a pretty good, nice little fail safe there for you if you guys are interested in betting. That's one that sticks out to me. They're giving all Ravens here. These are the top odds to score. The first guy for the Steelers is Najee Harris, George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth. one of these guys is probably going to score a touchdown. I think my money's probably on Pickens or Freiermuth. I don't expect the Steelers to run the ball all that well. The Ravens have been just one of the best defenses all year against the running back here. They've allowed 8 rushing touchdowns all year. The Steelers are pretty good too. They've allowed 12 rushing touchdowns on the year, but we do like Derrick Henry in this game. But the receiver spot here is where the Ravens have really taken a shine these last few weeks. I'm just looking for the Steelers. On the season, the Steelers have allowed 15 receiving touchdowns, and the Ravens are clocking in. The Ravens are up here. They've allowed 17. But if you look at the last 5 weeks of the season, the Ravens, one of the number 1 teams against opponent wide receivers. In 5 games, they've allowed 1 receiving touchdown. The Steelers, on the other hand, have been getting thrown on. You see 7 touchdowns here, 832. So it would have been a great matchup for Zay Flowers. So that's kind of why I like Rashad Bateman, maybe Mark Andrews in this one. I think even though Zay Flowers is out, you're still going to see Lamar Jackson have a good passing day. He did throw 3 touchdowns against the Steelers back in week whatever this was. You know, Mark Likely and Rashad Bateman all caught one, even though Flowers was the heavy hitter. And Henry did run for 162 here. So I still think the Ravens are going to do what they want. Not really sure where to attack this Ravens defense for the Steelers. You want to get Pickens involved early and keep him roaring. You got to try and run the ball. Najee and Jalen Warren here, I guess, is the ticket. So I actually think this game is going to be low scoring. If I'm looking at it, 43.5, which already is low scoring. This game did drop. Let me see here. I did have it at 45.5 when I logged these the other day, but with Zay Flowers being out, it dropped 2 points. So 18 to 25, 18 to 27 is kind of where this number is coming in at. Again, I kind of think the Steelers will keep it close. This is playoff football, Mike Tomlin. I'm leaning towards the Steelers. So fun game, no Zay Flowers. We'll move into the Sunday games here. Denver Broncos at Buffalo Bills. You have the Bills 8.5-point favorites here. We'll go over their practice reports. Whoops, that's Buffalo. All right, so huge list. Nobody ruled out, though. A backup cornerback here, questionable. Otherwise, we had everybody practiced in full today. Just a lot of guys kind of just on the injury report, not really injured type of thing. So Buffalo Bills looking very, very strong this week. The Broncos ruled out a backup offensive tackle. Tyler Beatty might be back from IR, and a couple other guys here look good to go. So pretty healthy game here for both sides. If we're just looking at some quick fantasy points allowed numbers here in the last 5 weeks, the Bills, the worst team against wide receiver. Now, a lot of that came against Jared Goff, but Bo Nix is hot right now, guys. Bo Nix has been one of the best fantasy quarterbacks in the league the last handful of games here. And if we just look at some of the numbers from these fantasy receivers, Kayshon Boutte, again, it was week 18, whatever, but 7 for 117 and a touchdown. Garrett Wilson went 7 for 66 and a touchdown. Devontae 5 for 47. Back in week 16, Kayshon Boutte 5 for 95 and a touchdown. So he likes playing Buffalo. Douglas and Bourne, whatever. Detroit had the monster games here. Amon-Ra, 40 fantasy points, but Tim Patrick, Jameson Williams, those guys all caught touchdowns. Back to LA Rams, Puka Nacua went nuclear, 12 for 162 and a touchdown. Cooper Kupp, 5 for 92 and a touchdown. So a lot of torching going on here for the Buffalo Bills defense these last handful of weeks. So something to keep an eye on there. And the Broncos, on the other hand, they rank 18th in that span, which we consider them a really good, team, a good team on, despite, I guess, they're a good team as a whole, but we know Patrick Peterson's there. But I think you can throw against Patrick Peterson or away from Patrick Peterson. Not Patrick Peterson, Pat Surtain. What am I talking about here? Pat Surtain, you throw away from him, and there's numbers following this here. So the Broncos do give up a little bit of points here. We still like Josh Allen in that. If I look at the rushing numbers real quick, we'll go to the last 5 weeks. Let me see. Let's go all the way down here. Broncos very stingy. They've only given up 3 touchdowns in the last 5 games. And the Bills had been one of the teams that had given up a lot of points on the year, but one of that came from Derrick Henry. They've been kind of average the last few games here. So decent run games. I don't like the Broncos run game at all, but I do think there's a chance James Cook can get involved and make some big plays here. But I'm kind of thinking there's a path where Bo Nix in this passing game for the Broncos. And keep in mind, this is a tough place to play. We don't like playing in Buffalo if we're the road team here. So a little bit interested in the 8.5. I think this game could get a lot of points to be had in this one. 47.5 implied. Let me see what I got here. That's saying Broncos 20, Buffalo 28. I think this game could go a little bit over. So I'm kind of liking the over, and I'm kind of liking the Broncos to stay in this game here, just because the Bills defense has been giving up a lot of fantasy points. This is the game to put your touchdown bets in, whether it's a Josh Allen rushing touchdown, a James Cook rushing touchdown. Not really quite sure what to do with Kincaid, Shakir, and the Buffalo Bills receivers, but I do like Allen. I do like James Cook. You could try something with, like we did the bet earlier, where you take a Khalil Shakir and a Keon Coleman and go fishing for one of those guys to score. Something like that could work. But I do like this bet for Cortland Sutton and Marvin Mims more. I'd rather do this duo, where if I put a $20 unit on both Sutton and Mims separately, I'm going to get paid out for $20 on Mims. It's $68 payout. For Sutton, it's a $49 payout. So if just Sutton scores, I'm still making about $9 on this bet. And if both score, which is very possible, we're looking like a very, very profitable, almost $120 up. I guess basically up $80 there. So that feels pretty good if you like those guys. I don't like the running backs in this one. Again, I mentioned that earlier. I don't really like this running game. But the passing numbers here, Bo Nix 225. I think that's very intriguing. Let me just look at these numbers real quick here. Go to the last 5 weeks, and if I just filter by ESPN here, the Buffalo Bills, again, Jared Goff played against them, so it kind of smacked them around, but they're giving up 300 yards per game over these last 5 weeks. So you saw, again, Joe Milton, 241, whatever. Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor combined for about 200, but some of that was in garbage time. Drake May threw for 261, Goff almost 500, Matt Stafford about 320, Purdy got kind of wrecked. So we do have a history. 1, 2, 3, 4 quarterbacks in the last 5 weeks have gone over that number. So I'm kind of interested in Nick's 225.5. People are saying under on Nick's 1.5 passing touchdowns. I'm going to take over on that one. That one's kind of fun. So I think Nick's looks good there. Not quite sure about Josh Allen. They've run the ball a lot with James Cook in the red zone. So I think Josh Allen rushes for a touchdown. I think he throws at least one. But maybe Cook gets that third. Maybe Cook gets 2. Maybe the Bills defense gets 1. There's a lot of weirdness going on here, but the way it's showing up right now is I like Bo Nix. And even if this game's garbage time, which could totally be at some point, Nix likely opens up the passing numbers here and probably hits his numbers. He's got 1.7 average on the year. I think I'll look there, and I like some of those receiver bets. I'm still going to take Buffalo to win, but I do think Denver keeps it closer than we would guess. 8.5 is a lot, even though this game's in Buffalo. We'll move on to the Packers and the Eagles. Let's talk Green Bay. Obviously, Christian Watson's out with the torn ACL. Andre Dillard, backup lineman. Zane Anderson, backup safety. Those guys not looking good to play. Romeo Doubs is practicing in full. Jordan Love with that elbow in full. And a few questionable guys here. TJ Slayton, they play a lot. Quay Walker, obviously, is the starter. And Evan Williams mixes in with the starters, and it's good to see Javon Bullard there and Andrew Cooper there not missing any time here. So the Packers are relatively healthy. It looks like for sure just no Christian Watson. And then if we go on down to Philadelphia, they already declared Jalen Hurts will play. They've ruled out a backup guard here. Devonta Smith not practicing today. I don't know if that's just a maintenance day or what. A.J. Brown, no practice yesterday, full practice today. He's fine. Otherwise, we look pretty good here. A couple backup guys maybe getting in mixed back in. But overall, Eagles, for being kind of a question, a lot of questions coming into the week, they're getting everybody back. Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, everybody looking good to go on this one. So what do we got here? The Eagles are 5.5-point home favorites. These two teams played earlier this year in Brazil. That was a fun game. The one that got Jordan Love hurt at the very end of the game. They're giving the Eagles 5.5. Which I think is kind of right on the spot here. The Packers really don't lose by a lot of points, so I think a lot of their games they're losing by 1, 2, 3, or 4 points. And the Packers do tend to play a lot better in the second half than they do in the first half of games. So keep an eye on that Green Bay plus 5.5. I think that one's interesting me just a little bit here. If we look at some of the fantasy points allowed over the last 5 weeks, though, quarterbacks, the Eagles and the Packers, they're both fantastic here. So they're not really easy teams to throw the ball on. The Eagles only allowing 863 yards. So that's pretty impressive. 9 touchdowns. The Packers allowing about 1,100 yards passing and 7 touchdowns. Both teams picking the ball off a lot too. So tough game to throw the ball in. If we look at the running backs points allowed here, we'll go to full PPR. Scroll it on down here. The Eagles, one of the best teams against running backs here, about 350 yards, only 1 rushing touchdown in that span. The Packers, kind of the same. They've given up less yards than the Eagles, but they've given up 3 touchdowns running and 2 touchdowns receiving here. So you can move the ball through the air, throwing the ball to the Packers. So we'll watch for Saquon Barkley. Maybe we look at some of those numbers for Saquon Barkley catching the ball. And Barkley did catch a touchdown against them week 1, 2 for 23 and a touchdown. So keep an eye on that. But what do we got here? I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs caught a bunch of passes. Saints caught a bunch of passes. The Lions caught a bunch of passes. Aaron Jones and Cam Akers caught some passes. So there is room to throw the ball against these guys. Yeah, man. Happy Friday to you as well, Scott. Hope you're doing well. We got some Vegas NFL parlays. Fantastic. A preseason bet on the Lions to win it all. So, yeah, so me being a Packer fan, I've kind of figured out, like, there's teams that I'm okay with winning the Super Bowl. There's teams that I don't want to win the Super Bowl. A Packer fan, like, we don't really have anything against Detroit. Like, Detroit's been so bad forever that they're kind of just like a younger brother. And it's okay to see your younger brother succeed sometimes. So if not the Packers, I'm rooting for the Lions to get there on the NFC side. I think I would put the Commanders as my 3rd team there, but I do want to see the Lions move up. The only player prep by what? Oh, okay, yeah. I was just looking at Jackson Dart today as well too. He's an exciting guy. I watched a good amount of his clips today, and he can move. He's had very good progression each year in college, and yeah, he's probably going to be moving up a lot of draft boards. And excited to see him at the combine. So that one's fun. Some nice underdog bets there for Mr. Scott. But I'm just kind of recapping some of the game, or not recapping, kind of previewing some of the games. I do like this Packers-Eagles game. I'm kind of thinking the Packers can hang in at 5.5. They really don't lose a lot of games by a lot of points here. If I just look at this real quick, they always find a way to kind of get back in. They lost by 5 to Philly week 1, lost by 2 to Minnesota, lost by 10 to Detroit. So 1 game there, and then by 3 to Detroit, 2 to Minnesota, 2 to Chicago. So most of their losses are by 4 points or less. So keep that in mind. And we kind of highlighted that these defenses are both playing very, very good football these last 5 games. They have Jordan Love throwing for more yards, which I would agree with. They have both quarterbacks not throwing 2 touchdowns. You know, you got Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts, tush push, and a Josh Jacobs guy that's just been racking up touchdowns. So both quarterbacks here, I don't feel great about either of them hitting 2. If I had to bet on one hitting 2, it's probably Jordan Love, though. They're giving Jordan Love an interception, but not Jalen Hurts. I'm open to Jalen Hurts getting an interception. The Packers have generated a ton of interceptions this season, and I believe Hurts threw 2 against them back in week 1, if that's correct. Yeah, he did throw 2 touchdowns, but he also threw 2 interceptions. So keep an eye on that Jalen Hurts interception number. If we go into receiving props real quick, I just want to see what they're liking for receptions. They're giving Jaden Reed, again, no Christian Watson. So the primary trio for receivers will be Reed, Dobbs, and Wicks for the Packers. Kraft out there at tight end. They're smashing Jaden Reed over 3.5 receptions here, and they have his yards just at 45.5. So if he catches 4, there's a good chance he goes over that number. So that's a sneaky one to keep an eye on. I do like Romeo Dobbs over 3.5 as well. They have him pretty low too, 47.5. So look for those 2 receivers. I even like Dontavian Wicks, who's been catching a lot of passes these last few weeks. So keep an eye on those 3 receivers. I think that's going to be what, if the Packers have any chance of winning this game, it's going to be with Jordan Love throwing the ball. I don't think that they can hang in and play, bully ball and run with Josh Jacobs and have their defense keep the Eagles off the field. So I like the Packers to try to throw the ball in this one and still establish the run at the same time. Whereas the Eagles, we know they only have 4 guys that they throw the ball to here. Is it a Dallas Goedert game? They're giving him over 3.5 receptions here. It's -135. They're kind of even on A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, saying about 5 catches there. I think that's fine. And then Saquon Barkley they're smashing his over 1.5. So I kind of like his yards at 12.5. We've noted the Packers give up some receiving yards to the backs. I think that's a juicy one here. So I'd take that one. And then I do like the Packers receivers a little bit here. If we just look at the touchdowns in this game real quick. Yeah, they're giving, the guys here, Barkley, Hurts, and Jacobs all one, but this game's going to come down to who else scores, because we know these guys are going to get theirs, but is it A.J. Brown? Is it Romeo Doubs? Is it Jaden Reed? I think I'm kind of interested in this Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed double tap, where if you were to put $20 unit on both guys here, let's see what you would come out with. You put a 20 on Doubs and you put a 20 on Reed, you're going to be up $20 on this bet if one of these guys scores, and if both score, that's a pretty good return, about $125. You're up about $85. So I like that one quite a bit. You could try the same thing with AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. It's just not as good of a payout, but I do think one of these two receivers will score, and the odds of some of these Packer receivers scoring probably pretty good. And then did we look at rushing props real quick? I mean, they got Saquon at 103.5. The Packers really haven't given up a 100-yard back since Joe Mixon back in week 7. Only 3 backs have gone over 100 yards against the Packers. Mixon, Kieran, 4, Jonathan Taylor, and Saquon Barkley, and it was 109. So, and the Packers, 65 yards is the most they've given up since back to week 11. That was DeAndre Swift twice. So I do think that's a little bit, I think that's a little bit tough of a number for him to hit, but it's probably going to go over. I think Jacobs is the interesting one here. Can he get over 70? Because if he gets over his prop, the Packers are controlling the line of scrimmage. They're eating clock. That's probably their way to win the game. So I think the Eagles will win the game, but I think the Packers will find a way to make it close and look like like they were in it the whole time, kind of score at the end of the game. So this is something. So I'm a Packer fan first and foremost, and if there's a path to the Packers winning this game, you kind of have a dinged up AJ Brown. You have potentially a rusty Jalen Hurts who hasn't played for a couple weeks, and the Packers defense has been playing very good defensively. They haven't been allowing a lot of passing numbers, and just if Jalen Hurts is off in this game, or if AJ Brown's on 100%, those two aren't clicking. And if the Packers are running the ball, there's a chance in this one that I think everything could play out for the Packers, and they're playing with a lead, and you're forcing Jalen Hurts to throw the ball a ton, which is what they don't want to do. They want to play from a lead and run the ball. I do think there's a chance that the Packers could win that way. Injury-wise, I'm not really concerned. Like the Packers, the only starter they're missing is going to be Christian Watson. I guess Jair Alexander's one guy to keep an eye on, but we really haven't played with him this whole season, and they've been pretty sound on defense. So no Jair, no Christian Watson, but everybody else here is looking questionable, but they've been practicing. So I don't think I'm too concerned about the injuries. Oh, hell yeah. A $20 bet. Yeah, you probably timed that up perfectly, because this morning I saw him buzzing around on Twitter. So well-timed time to be in Las Vegas there, Scott. Commanders at Tampa Bay. We're going to cover this game real quick. The Buccaneers are 3-point home favorites in this one. 50.5 total implied. Is that the most on the weekend? It might be. It is. This is the most exciting game of the weekend, I think, because it could go either way. I'm probably tapping the Commanders +3 here. I know they played earlier this year, but that was week 1. That's such a long time ago. And I know the Packers and the Eagles played week 1 too. That's such a long time ago. But the growth of this Commanders team, that there's a lot more growth to this team, and they're not going to play this same way here. 20-37 was the score. Baker Mayfield comes out hot with 4 touchdowns. Jaden Daniels didn't throw a touchdown, threw for 2, ran for 2, and Brian Robinson rushed for 1 as well. Just getting his legs underneath him, throwing the ball a little bit, just getting the feel for the NFL game, I think, from Jaden Daniels in that first game. I'm not quite sure why Tampa Bay's 3-point home favorites here. If anything, it should maybe be -1 Tampa Bay, but they're kind of giving us a spot here to take Washington at +3, which intrigues me. If we look at the injury reports real quick for these two teams, Washington, Marshawn Lattimore did not practice today, but it's a non-injury thing, so it's more of a day of rest. They've already said that he's going to play. And, of course, if you guys know anything about Marshawn Lattimore, he loves to play against Mike Evans, so that'll be a fun little position to watch there. A lot of guys in full. Nobody missing here that's of main importance here. So I think the Commanders are coming in pretty good to this one. They're feeling healthy. And then Tampa Bay, let's see what we got over here. A couple guys listed questionable on defense, but they practiced in full today. Cade Otton in full. They might get their tight end back here. Antoine Winfield full. Mike Evans just getting some days off here. So Tampa Bay coming into this one feeling pretty good too. So I do want to look at let's look at the quarterback points allowed, because I think you can throw on both of these teams. And I'm just looking at the last 5 week samples here. The Buccaneers coming in here at 23rd. They've allowed 6 passing touchdowns. The Commanders have only allowed 3 passing touchdowns. So this is one of the more exciting turnaround stories. This was a defense that we were picking on heavily last year. And now these last 5 weeks here, they're one of the best teams against the quarterback position. So maybe some Baker Mayfield struggles in this one. I mean, 805 yards allowed in those games. Buccaneers quarterbacks giving up about 1,106 touchdowns. So slight edge to the Jaden Daniels side for, I guess, success. Look at the running back numbers here. So you can run on the Commanders. They're giving up a healthy amount of points here. 5 rushing touchdowns, well over 100 yards a game rushing to the running backs, and then even a receiving touchdown in there. Tampa Bay, the number 1 team against opponent running backs, 219 yards in the last 5 games, only 1 rushing touchdown. So we're going to give the Buccaneers the edge in rushing the ball. Bucky Irving and Rachaad White will lead that way. The Commanders don't really run the ball well. Jaden Daniels does run the ball well. But Brian Robinson and the guys have not been really humming on all cylinders here. So we'll give the edge to the running backs in Tampa Bay. And then did we look at the receiver points real quick? Last 5 weeks. All right. You got the Buccaneers kind of middle of the road here, and the Commanders kind of locked down here. So to me, this is kind of coming up Washington here, Scott. I think you're rooting for Baker Evans. Bucky, also love and respect for all the stuff Washington. It's been both teams really, like, we didn't expect Baker Mayfield to hit it again this year, and he somehow ended up playing way better. I think a lot of that was because the running game was so good with Bucky Irving. And, you know, at times Chris Godwin was like one of the number 1 fantasy receivers for a stretch. Cade Otton was relied on heavily in the middle of the year, and then Mike Evans closed the season very strong. So they've had a lot of good players to lean on all year. So I do think the Bucs have a little bit more weaponry. But my head's kind of saying I like this +3 for Washington. If this game comes down to a field goal, so be it. But it's kind of coming up that way for me. Players to score, yeah, Bucky Irving probably going to get one. I do think we kind of highlighted the Buccaneers will be able to run the ball with success. So if I like the touchdown here, I'll probably like some of Bucky's rushing props. And then we saw that teams were kind of struggling to throw the ball against these guys here, but it's hard for me. Mike Evans versus Marshawn Lattimore, that's such a fun matchup. I think Mike Evans could get something in that one. Probably going to go Jaden Daniels here. When all the chips down, I expect Jaden Daniels to run the ball and play pretty heavily with his legs in this one. So I like him. I do like Terry McLaurin as well. Those are the 2 guys that I'm looking for the Washington Commanders. And then, I don't know, this Jalen McMillan guy is starting to make a name for himself and be someone consistent. I'm not in love with any of these passing numbers here, but they're giving both guys 2 passing touchdowns. So that does push me more towards Terry McMillan and Mike Evans. You can maybe even sprinkle in Bucky Irving, because he does get some receiving touchdowns every now and then. And they're kind of giving even odds here on interceptions right now, which is interesting. Receiving numbers real quick here. They're smashing Mike Evans over 5.5 against Marshawn Lattimore. We shall see. Bucky Irving at 3.5 here. McLaurin at 5.5. Nothing's really sticking out in terms of these receptions for me. We do have Austin Eckler back, which is good to see. They're giving McMillan over 53.5. They're giving Mike Evans about 75.5. I don't know. I do like this game from a scoring perspective. I just don't know about these yards here. Both teams have been pretty solid defensively. We had Baker in all formats. Watching the playoffs last year, he reminded me of Dan Marino. So that's something for life. Interesting. That's actually a pretty good comparison there, Scott. I'm taking Bucky Irving over his 90, probably. You know, if he gets 15 carries, he's probably going over 90. I like the Jaden Daniels over 51.5 too. So for some rushing upsides for you guys. Man, I'm gonna lean Washington Commanders here. Both teams are playing red hot right now. I think Jaden Daniels with his legs is going to be hard to contain. So you can coin flip this one. I'm still taking the Commanders +3, but I like that game a lot this weekend. And let's finish up here. Monday Night Football. We have the Minnesota Vikings at the LA Rams, but it's in Arizona. Obviously, anyone affected by the wildfires in California. I hope you guys are okay. Scott asking about Rachaad White. I don't know, man. He just really has not been. I'm going to pull up some of his numbers. He has not been locked in, so to say. Let's see here. So 1 catch last week makes me a little bit nervous. 7, 2, 2, 1, 1. A lot of choppiness and inconsistencies here. I think it's a fine bet. I don't know if it's easy money. I mean, he's failed this in 3 of the last 6 weeks, which gives me a little bit of pause, but more often than not, he does go over that number. So I think it's like a little easy money, not like smash it, easy money. But I did see it was -130. So it is intriguing. This game is the Vikings -2.5 here at LA Rams. This game was earlier, it was listed as -1, but then when it shifted to Arizona, it grew a little bit to -2.5, 47.5 implied in this one. If I just open up, there's probably not going to be a lot of injury reports here, guys. If I look at the Rams real quick, whatever, Hunter Long and Rob Havenstein, Vikings, Ty Chandler, Pat Jones, whatever, but everybody else kind of in full, looking good here. Pretty healthy for both sides. If we're just looking at touchdowns in this game, you know, Kieran Williams, probably going to go with him, probably going to go with Justin Jefferson. These two teams played each other earlier this year, and Matthew Stafford looked really good in that game. He threw, I believe it was 4 touchdowns in that game. It might have been a Thursday night game or a Sunday night game or something like that, but this was a very good game from the Rams. This game was in LA again, 30-20 back in like week 9 or 8 or something like that. Stafford threw 279 and 4 touchdowns. Kieran ran for 97. Puka 106. This might have been the return of Puka Nacua. 51 and a touchdown for Kupp, 35 and 2 touchdowns for the Demarcus Robinson, and Kieran Williams caught a touchdown. So all the guys 8 for the Rams. Justin Jefferson was really the only guy that showed up for this game. 8 for 115. Jordan Addison's obviously been a lot different player since this game. And this was a quiet Aaron Jones night against the Rams here. So I don't know. Rams limping into this one, kind of licking their wounds from that Lions loss. I think there is momentum here for the LA Rams to win this game here, but who knows? The Vikings could be, trying to get the taste out of their mouths after getting wiped last weekend. So I'm not quite sure how I lean here. I do think if there's an upset waiting to happen, it would be this one. The Rams at home, even though it's in Arizona, they are off a week of rest as well. Let me just look at these touchdown props again. I do like Puka Nacua in this one to score. Jefferson's an easy click as well, and you could maybe try Jordan Addison. I'm not super in love with Aaron Jones. He doesn't really get a lot of touchdown opportunities. So I guess I'm taking Kieran, JJ, and Puka touchdowns in this one. Passing props real quick. I'll give both guys over 2 touchdowns here. They're liking Sam Darnold to hit the 2, Stafford a little bit to hit the 2. I think I'll probably go with the Darnold one and I'll go with the Darnold over passing touchdowns, and I'll get these other Puka, JJ, and Kieran touchdowns on the other side. Receiving numbers real quick. They're saying over Puka 7.5. So what's his yards at? Puka 88.5. I'll probably take that. I'm fine with JJ over 90.5. He's due for a big game after last weekend. Those are really the only 2 receivers that I feel good about. You could try Jordan Addison. He's kind of hit or miss sometimes, but I wouldn't be surprised if he bounces back as well. They're giving TJ Hawkinson over 3.5 receptions in this one, so keep an eye on that. And then where is Addison? Addison at 4.5. That's kind of fair. 4 to 5 catches for him seems to make sense. But I do like Hawkinson. If they're giving Hawkinson the overs here, maybe keep an eye on Mr. Hawkinson. And then we'll finish up with the rushing numbers real quick here. Probably Kieran Williams, but this Vikings defense is pretty good. Kieran did have a good game against them, 97 yards back in that earlier season matchup. Probably not going to be a rushing game for these guys, though. I'm leaning towards the passing game being the more exciting thing here. So, gun to my head real quick. I'm going to take the Rams plus 2.5. I took the under the Rams plus the points and future on the Rams to win the bowl. Oh, wow. Yeah, it's kind of felt this way for a while that the Rams had been a team you don't want to play in the playoffs. So the 4-5 matchup, this is not easy. Like I'd rather play Tampa Bay, I think, than the Rams. So tough draw for Minnesota, man. It's going to be a tough game for them and the Rams playing in Arizona. Yeah, you've convinced me, my man. I'll be open to taking the Rachaad White 1.5 receptions and look at some of those numbers. But that's gonna do it for tonight, guys. This was a fun way to kind of just look at all the stuff and figure out what's happening tomorrow and Sunday. If you guys are new to the Fantasy Fellowship, definitely check out the website. Subscribe to the YouTube channel here. We're gonna be talking a lot more about Jackson Dart soon. So we'll see if he is the 101. Scott's got some big money on it. But anyways, guys, enjoy the games tomorrow. I might post some player prop bets on the website tomorrow morning. I got to talk to one of my guys and get some bets up there for you guys. But either way, enjoy the weekend of games. We'll see you guys soon. Peace. Got me feeling icy.